Perhaps every one of us has walked through a season when our prayers seemed to echo back into silence. You prayed with all the sincerity you possessed, waited with patience, and hoped that one day a door would finally open. Yet as one day followed another, your circumstances remained unchanged. There were even moments when everything seemed to grow heavier, quietly leading you to wonder whether God was still listening. That question does not arise from a lack of faith, but from a heart that has grown weary from trying to believe amid things it cannot yet understand. Yet one of the greatest mysteries of the journey of faith is that the moments that make us want to give up the most are often the very moments when God is quietly accomplishing His most important work. Not through unmistakable signs or miracles appearing before our eyes, but through subtle transformations taking place deep within the soul. It is precisely in the waiting, the trials, and the silences that seem so meaningless that God is preparing not only the circumstances that lie ahead, but also the person who will one day step into that future. Perhaps when you reach the end of this journey, you will discover that what you once called a delay was, in reality, part of a far greater and more beautiful plan. So stay with me until the end of this video, because sometimes a single new perspective is enough to transform the way you see the very path you are walking today. 1. God's silence isn't His absence. The first sign that many people experience before witnessing a breakthrough is the feeling that God has become completely silent. You pray again and again, yet no clear answer comes. You wait for a door to open, yet everything remains still. You look at your life and wonder why the things you have prayed for over months or even years still show no sign of change. It is this silence that so easily convinces us that God has forgotten us, that our prayers are no longer being heard, or perhaps that we have done something wrong and are no longer worthy of His help. Yet there is a profound truth that many people only recognize after they have made it through their darkest seasons. God's silence is never the same as His absence. Human beings naturally tend to believe only what they can see, touch, or measure. When no visible sign appears, we assume that nothing is happening. But just as a seed remains hidden beneath the soil for weeks before a tender shoot finally breaks through the ground, the most important growth often takes place where our eyes cannot see. What makes the waiting so difficult is not simply that we have not yet received what we long for. The deeper pain is the feeling of being left behind. You watch others receive the very things you have prayed for. See them walk through doors before which you are still standing, and deep within your heart, a deeply human question begins to emerge. Why has God done this for them, but not yet for me? This is where we often fall into one of the most common psychological traps. We allow our present circumstances to determine our worth. If the door has not opened, we conclude that we are not good enough. If our prayers remain unanswered, we assume that we are not loved. If our lives have not changed, we begin to believe that perhaps we are walking the wrong path. Yet sometimes the issue is not that you have been rejected. Perhaps you are simply in a season where something within you is being prepared for something far greater. This understanding closely reflects Carl Jung's view of humanity's inner growth. Jung believed that every person must pass through a process he called individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming the truest version of oneself. It is not about becoming perfect, but about learning to acknowledge every part of who we are, including the parts we have spent years trying to hide. There are times when God seems silent, not because He is moving away from you, but because you are being invited to look more deeply within yourself. Perhaps you are being healed from a fear that has lived inside you for years. Perhaps you are learning to let go of your need to control everything. Perhaps you are beginning to realize that your worth is not found in success, wealth, titles, or the approval of other people. Silence is not always the end of the story. It is more like the moment when a goldsmith holds a piece of gold in the fire. From the outside, all you can see is heat and discomfort. Yet, within, a process of refinement is taking place. The very thing that makes you feel as though you are being tested may also be the very thing that is making you stronger. I have experienced this feeling myself. At the time, my family still gathered around the dinner table every evening, still took photographs together during the holidays, and still asked one another how the day had gone. Yet beneath the surface of that home, silence had begun to speak louder than conversation. My wife and I seemed to communicate only about the things that needed to be taken care of. Laughter gradually disappeared, replaced by misunderstandings, disappointments, and a distance that neither of us knew how to begin repairing. What hurt me most was not the arguments themselves, but the painful realization that the people who had once felt closest to one another were slowly becoming strangers. For many months, I continually prayed that God would restore my family to what it had once been. There were evenings, after the children had gone to bed, when I sat alone in the living room, looking around the quiet house with a heart weighed down by sorrow. I began to wonder whether God was still listening to my prayers. If He were truly present, why would He allow people who loved one another to drift so far apart? Then, after a long season had passed, I began to see something I had never been calm enough to recognize before. All that time, I had been asking God to change everyone else, while rarely taking an honest look at myself. I had always believed that I was the right one, the one who had sacrificed more, the one who deserved to be understood first. Yet the very season that I thought God had remained silent forced me to confront a far more difficult question. Am I loving my family in the way they truly need, or only in the way I believe is right? That single question became the beginning of a transformation within my heart. I learned to listen more instead of always trying to explain myself. I learned to apologize without waiting for someone else to admit they were wrong first. I spent time sitting beside my children without holding my phone, and I made time to talk with my wife without trying to prove who was right in every disagreement. Those changes happened so slowly that almost no one noticed them at first. Yet little by little, the atmosphere within our home began to change. We did not become a perfect family overnight, but we gradually became people who loved one another more deeply and understood one another more fully. Looking back now, I realize that the greatest gift God gave me was not merely the restoration of my family, but the gift of a new heart. The season I once believed God was doing nothing at all turned out to be the very season in which He was quietly healing the deepest places within me. And as I changed, the relationships around me began to change as well. Very often, the first miracle is not that your outward circumstances change, but that you yourself begin to change. Day by day, you become more patient instead of more anxious. You learn to trust, even when no answer has yet appeared. You grow stronger, more peaceful, and able to see life from a perspective you never had before. These changes happen so quietly that they are easy to overlook, yet they are among the most precious gifts you could ever receive. So do not rush to conclude while your journey is still unfolding. Silence does not mean that God has stopped working. While you are waiting for a door to open, God may also be preparing you to be strong enough to walk through it. And perhaps one day, when you look back, you will realize that the greatest miracle was not only the blessing you eventually received, but the person you became throughout the waiting. Stay with us for the next part, because there is something profoundly important that many people overlook during seasons of waiting. Sometimes the clearest evidence that God is still at work is not found in what is happening around you, but in the quiet, almost imperceptible changes taking place within you. 2. Your faith is being tested. When the waiting stretches on, the first thing to be tested is not your patience, but your faith. This is the season when every negative emotion begins to surface. You watch others receive the very things they prayed for, while your own life seems unable to move forward. You begin to compare, to question, and to wonder whether you should continue hoping at all. What is remarkable is that God never asks us to understand His entire plan. He simply calls us to keep trusting, even when we cannot yet see the outcome. Genuine faith is not built during the days when everything unfolds as we hoped. It is forged when our circumstances seem to stand against every reason for hope. It is in the moments when we most want to give up that we are allowed to choose between allowing fear to lead us or continuing to walk by faith. And more often than we realize, that choice becomes the turning point just before the miracle appears. The greatest test of faith is not when hardship first arrives, but when we can no longer see a reason to keep believing. When a new challenge appears, we often find the strength to face it. But after praying again and again, giving everything we have, and waiting for what feels like an endless season without seeing any change, weariness quietly begins to settle into the mind. You no longer question only your circumstances. You begin to question your faith itself. You wonder whether you have been hoping for something that will never happen. You ask yourself why other people seem to receive their answers so quickly while you remain standing exactly where you have always been. This is the moment when a silent battle begins within the human heart. One voice is fear, urging you to believe that everything is over, that God no longer cares, that your prayers no longer matter. The other is a quiet, almost imperceptible voice deep within you, gently reminding you that perhaps this story is not over yet, that perhaps God is still at work in ways you cannot yet see. It is within the space between these two voices that faith is tested. We watch someone else receive a promotion while we continue struggling in our careers. We see others enter joyful relationships while we are still healing from old wounds. We hear stories of answered prayers and quietly ask ourselves why God seems to be delaying His answer to ours. Yet what we see is only a very small part of another person's story. We see their harvest, but not the nights they once spent weeping alone. We see the door they finally walked through, but not the countless doors before which they patiently waited. Every person has a different journey, a different season, and a different path of growth. A flower does not bloom sooner simply because it notices another flower has already blossomed. Every seed has its own appointed season. My cousin Emily once shared with me that she had gradually begun to feel like a stranger among the friends who had once been closest to her. When they were younger, they spent time together almost every day. But as the years passed, each person's life took a different direction. Some got married, others moved away. Many became occupied with raising children or building their careers. Phone calls became less frequent. Plans were postponed again and again. And Emily slowly began to feel as though she no longer belonged in their lives. What hurt her most was not that everyone had become so busy, but the feeling of being left behind. There was one occasion when she saw photographs of her friends gathering together on social media, completely unaware that they had even met. Birthdays that had once been celebrated together became nothing more than a few brief messages exchanged online. Emily prayed many times for God to restore those relationships. Yet the harder she tried to hold on, the greater the distance seemed to become. There were moments when she wondered whether God intended for her to walk this season entirely alone. Then one day, Emily realized that she had spent so much energy trying to preserve the past that she had forgotten a simple truth. People and relationships are meant to change with time. She stopped asking, "Why is everyone drifting away from me?" and began asking a different question. Could it be that God is bringing the right people into my life for the person I am becoming? That single shift in perspective transformed the way she viewed her loneliness. Emily began participating in church groups, volunteering in her community, and opening her heart more freely to those around her. Little by little, she met new friends who shared her faith and the values by which she wanted to live. Unexpectedly, some of her old friends also found their way back into her life. This time, however, their friendships were different. They were no longer sustained by old routines or familiarity, but by mutual understanding, respect, and genuine maturity. Looking back, Emily came to understand that what she had once believed was a painful loss had actually been God's way of teaching her to love more maturely. He had not simply preserved a few old relationships. He had opened the door to new ones that reflected the person she was becoming and the season of life through which he was leading her. Sometimes, what God is inviting you to examine is not whether you are strong enough to endure your circumstances, but how you see yourself during the waiting. Do you believe you are someone whom God has forgotten, or someone he is quietly preparing for something better? Do you see today's hardships as the end of your story, or simply as a stretch of road that must be traveled before you reach your destination? These are not easy questions to answer, yet it is precisely by facing them honestly that you begin to grow in ways you never imagined. Faith does not mean you will never feel afraid, anxious, or discouraged. Faith means that even while many questions remain unanswered, you choose to keep moving forward. You continue praying even though no answer has yet appeared. You continue believing that God is at work even when nothing around you seems to have changed. Many times the miracle does not begin with an immediate change in your circumstances. It begins with your heart gradually becoming more peaceful, more steadfast, and more ready to receive what God has already been preparing for you. If today you find yourself walking through this very season of testing, do not mistake your weariness for weak faith. The fact that you sometimes wrestle with doubt or carry unanswered questions does not mean you have lost your faith. These are deeply human emotions experienced by anyone passing through hardship. What matters is that even on the days when your heart feels fragile, you continue turning toward God. And perhaps, while you cannot yet see any visible change in your circumstances, He is quietly building within you a stronger foundation day by day. So do not be too quick to believe that you are standing still simply because nothing has changed the way you hoped it would. It may be that this very moment is when God is preparing the greatest turning point of your life. For time and again, before the miracle appears, the first thing God chooses to shape is not your circumstances, but your faith, so that when the blessing finally arrives, you will not only know how to receive it, but will also have grown enough to cherish and sustain it. 3. Waiting is not rejection. One of the greatest misunderstandings we can fall into is believing that if God has not answered our prayers immediately, then He must have rejected them. We have grown up in a world where almost everything happens at remarkable speed. It takes only a few seconds to send a message, a few minutes to order something online, and only a few days to receive the result. Gradually, this rhythm of life teaches us to equate delay with failure. So when our prayers remain unanswered for what feels like a long time, many of us begin to believe that the door has been closed forever. We are no longer disappointed merely because we have not received what we hoped for. We are heartbroken because we begin to believe that God is no longer listening. Perhaps you too have stood in that very silence, looking at your own life and wondering why the things that seem to come so easily to others have still not found their way to you. If that question has ever risen within your heart, know that you are far from alone. Countless adults carry that quiet ache with them every single day. They continue going to work, caring for their families, and faithfully fulfilling their responsibilities. Yet deep within their hearts remains a question that is difficult to put into words. They wonder whether this season of waiting still has any meaning. Little by little, they begin to doubt their own faith more than they doubt their circumstances. That is why waiting often exhausts us even more than hardship itself. At least hardship has a shape that we can face directly. Waiting, on the other hand, is like walking through a dense fog. You keep moving forward, but you have no idea how far you still are from your destination. Yet God's timing does not operate according to human impatience. What we call delay is often nothing more than a season of preparation, allowing everything to unfold at precisely the right moment. A gardener would never pull a young shoot from the soil simply because he wants it to grow faster. He understands that what appears motionless above the ground is actually developing quietly beneath it. The roots must grow deep before the tree can rise high enough to withstand the wind. If the trunk grows too quickly while the roots remain weak, the first storm may uproot it entirely. Our inner lives are much the same. Some blessings, if they arrive too soon, become burdens rather than gifts. Some opportunities, if they come before we are ready, are almost impossible to sustain. This perspective closely reflects the spirit of Carl Jung's understanding of psychological growth. Jung believed that maturity is not measured by how much we acquire, but by the kind of person we become, someone capable of carrying what life places in our hands. He often spoke of inner transformation as the process through which a person gradually comes into harmony with their true self. Simply put, before life entrusts you with greater responsibility, a new relationship, or an unexpected opportunity, something within you must also expand to receive it. If the vessel is still too small, pouring more water into it serves no purpose. It simply overflows. Sometimes God is not withholding the gift, He is enlarging the vessel. One of the things that wounds us most deeply is our habit of comparing our journey with someone else's. We see a friend receive a promotion, an acquaintance find their dream job, a family welcomes a new child, or someone recover from the illness they had long prayed about. Such moments can easily convince us that God is answering everyone else's prayers while quietly overlooking our own. Yet what we witness is only a single moment in someone else's story. We do not know how many years of preparation came before it, nor can we see the challenges that still lie ahead of them. Perhaps the hardest part of waiting is not the waiting itself, but not knowing what we are waiting for. When we cannot yet see the purpose of this season, it is easy to mistake it for empty time. But viewed through the eyes of faith, this very season may be where countless unseen things are quietly being arranged. The right people may already be making their way into your life. New doors may be opening in places you have never thought to look. Other possibilities may be quietly disappearing, protecting you from choices that appear attractive but would never have brought lasting peace. You can see only the present moment. God sees the entire journey. A beautiful illustration of this truth can be found in the journey of Lyra Balakwa in his Dark Materials. From childhood, Lyra lived surrounded by mysteries she could never fully understand. She repeatedly lost people she loved and watched doors close just as she believed she was about to find the answers she had been searching for. There were seasons when every road ahead seemed hidden, and everything she longed for appeared endlessly delayed. Looking only at those individual moments, it would have been easy to conclude that fate was continually denying her. Yet it was precisely those long stretches of waiting that quietly shaped her into someone braver, someone able to distinguish fear from truth, and the difference between what she wanted and what she truly needed in order to continue her journey. Lyra's story is not merely an adventure across extraordinary worlds. It is also the story of discovering who she truly is. Every loss, every season of waiting, and every unanswered question compelled her to confront the parts of herself that had not yet matured. Jung believed that genuine maturity begins when we dare to step beyond the familiar masks we wear and encounter our authentic self beneath them. It is much like a seed lying hidden beneath the soil for a long season. From above, it appears that nothing is happening, yet beneath the surface, the roots continue growing day after day. Had Lyra been given every answer from the very beginning, she might never have become strong enough or wise enough to carry the truth she eventually discovered. That is why the waiting in her journey was never rejection. It was the necessary season in which the person within her was growing before she could step into something far greater. If today you still find yourself in that season, do not be too quick to conclude that God has said no. What you call a delay may simply be His way of protecting you from receiving something before the proper time. What you see as a closed door may actually be an invitation to continue growing just a little longer. And perhaps even now, while you feel as though nothing at all is happening, countless important pieces are quietly falling into place, beyond the reach of your sight. Thank you for staying with me through the first half of this journey. If these reflections have spoken to your heart in some small way, I invite you to continue into the next part. What we are about to explore offers a very different perspective on what so many people call signs. And perhaps that perspective will help you look back on your own journey with a deeper sense of peace than ever before. 4. God has something greater. We often ask God to solve the immediate problem standing before us, yet His plans almost always reach far beyond anything we can imagine. When we find ourselves facing hardship, what we long for usually seems very clear. Someone unemployed prays only for a new job. Someone who is ill longs simply to regain their health. Someone who feels alone hopes for a companion to walk beside them. Someone struggling financially asks only for enough to make it through another month. These prayers are genuine, deeply human, and entirely understandable. When we are in pain, we rarely have the strength to see beyond what is directly in front of us. We ask God to change our circumstances, while He may already be seeing the entire road that stretches far beyond anything we can yet comprehend. That is why not every prayer is answered in the way we expect, It is not because God is indifferent to your suffering, but because what you are asking for may be only a small part of the greater blessing He is preparing. It is much like a child pleading with a father to repair a broken toy, while the father already knows that in a few days he will bring home a completely new gift, one better suited to the child's growth. The child sees only what has been lost. The father sees what is about to come. The distance between them is not a distance of love, but a distance of vision. We often define a miracle as the rapid transformation of our circumstances. Yet from the perspective of faith, a miracle sometimes begins with the widening of our vision. Once our perspective changes, we no longer ask only, "Why hasn't this happened yet?" We begin asking a different question. Could there be something greater that I simply cannot see yet? That question alone creates room for hope. Hope is no longer dependent upon everything unfolding according to our own expectations, but rests instead on the confidence that life is still moving according to a purpose far greater than we presently understand. Carl Jung once offered a profound insight that speaks directly to this truth. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. When our hearts are filled with fear, all we can see is loss. But as our hearts begin to heal, the very same circumstances begin to reveal an entirely different meaning. This is also what Jung meant when he spoke about the process of inner transformation. He believed that maturity is not simply the accumulation of success or experience, but the gradual expansion of the soul's capacity to contain life itself. Imagine a clay vessel being shaped on a potter's wheel. If the potter were to stop too soon, the vessel would remain far smaller than its true potential. The constant reshaping places tremendous pressure upon the clay, yet it is precisely that pressure that creates a greater space within it. Life often works in much the same way. What you call delay may actually be the very process through which God is enlarging your inner life, so that you will one day be able to receive something far greater. Perhaps the most beautiful part of God's plan is not merely the gift waiting at the end of the journey, but the person you become throughout the waiting itself. If the miracle arrived too early, while impatience still ruled your heart, you might easily lose it. If success came before pride had been softened, that very success could become the reason you drift away from what matters most. If a new relationship began before old wounds had truly healed, there is every chance you would carry those wounds into a new love. That is why God is preparing not only the miracle, but also the person who will receive it. During the season, you believe you are simply waiting. He may actually be teaching you patience when life refuses to unfold according to your plans. He may be teaching you humility as you discover that you cannot control everything. He may be teaching you to trust Him even when no answer has yet appeared. These lessons are rarely comfortable, yet they become the very foundation that enables you to preserve the blessings entrusted to you later. One of the clearest illustrations of this truth in the Bible is the life of Joseph. As a young man, Joseph received extraordinary dreams about his future. Judging only by those dreams, anyone might have assumed that his life would quickly move toward honor and greatness. Instead, the opposite happened. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, thrown into prison, and spent years trapped in circumstances that seemed completely without hope. Looking only at each individual chapter of his life, it would have been almost impossible to believe that all of it belonged to a greater and more beautiful plan. Viewed through Jung's perspective, Joseph's story was not merely one of outward trials, but of profound inner transformation. The years of betrayal taught him to release resentment. The years in prison cultivated patience, endurance, and unwavering trust. Had Joseph been elevated to a position of great authority while he was still a young man, he might not have possessed the depth of character required to exercise that authority with mercy and wisdom. Those seasons that appeared to be nothing but loss were quietly preparing him for the far greater calling that awaited him. The same pattern unfolds in the lives of countless people we encounter every day. Looking only at the present, they see nothing but closed doors. Yet years later, when they look back, they realize that every closed door gently guided them toward a path for which they remain profoundly grateful. What changed was not only their circumstances. The greatest transformation took place within them. They became calmer, more attentive, more compassionate, and far more grateful for life's simplest gifts than they had ever been before. Perhaps you too are living through a season in which your prayers still seem unanswered. You continue waiting for an opportunity, for healing, for restoration, for change, or for a new door to open. If that is where you find yourself today, do not be too quick to believe that God is merely withholding what you have asked for. It may be that He is preparing something you cannot yet imagine, because you have not yet lived enough to recognize it. Not because your request is too small, but because His love always sees farther than your present vision can reach. Sometimes we ask only for a single candle to light the darkness before us, while God is preparing the sunrise. Sometimes we ask merely to survive a storm, while He is leading us toward a place where those storms will no longer determine the direction of our lives. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not that God changes our circumstances exactly as we requested, but that He transforms us into people who can step into the future with far greater peace, wisdom, and maturity than we possessed on the day we first began to pray. One day, when you look back, you may find yourself smiling as you realize that what God gave you was not merely the answer to a single prayer, but an entire life gently guided towards something more beautiful than you ever dared to imagine. In that moment, you will understand that some prayers are not answered according to our own expectations, not because they have been rejected, but because God is writing a story far greater than the single page we are able to see today. 5. Your miracle is drawing near. Many people believe the sign of a miracle is when circumstances finally begin to change, when a long-awaited door at last opens, when illness is healed, when financial burdens begin to ease, or when a prayer receives a clear and unmistakable answer. We naturally look for signs that can be seen with our own eyes because visible evidence brings reassurance to the heart. Yet if you look back over the journeys of countless people who have walked through seasons that seemed completely without hope, you will notice something very different. The first sign of a miracle rarely appears in the world around you. It appears within you. It is the moment when, after every disappointment, you still find the strength to pray one more time. It is the moment when, after countless occasions on which you almost gave up, a quiet voice still whispers within you, "Keep walking." That voice may be almost imperceptible, yet it is often the most precious thing you possess. Sometimes we measure faith by our emotions. When we feel strong, we assume our faith is strong. When we feel exhausted, we believe we are losing it. But genuine faith is not always the feeling of certainty. Sometimes faith is nothing more than choosing to take one more step, even when you cannot yet see what lies ahead. That is why so many people fail to recognize that the simple fact they are still holding on to hope is itself a miracle already unfolding quietly within their hearts. Carl Jung once wrote words that beautifully capture this truth. "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Those words remind us that we are not defined solely by what has happened to us, but also by the way we choose to respond to it. From Jung's perspective, every hardship carries within it the possibility of discovering an inner strength we never knew we possessed. This does not mean suffering is somehow good. Pain remains pain. But when we refuse to allow our pain to define our entire identity, a quiet transformation begins. Jung described this as the journey toward wholeness. Put more simply, it is like a cracked mirror that no longer pretends to be flawless. Instead, it learns to reflect light through the very fractures it once tried to hide. Your life can become much the same. Losses, failures, and seasons of waiting do not necessarily diminish your worth. Sometimes, they create a depth within you that peaceful seasons alone could never produce. Perhaps that is why the greatest sign of a miracle is not that your circumstances suddenly change, but that your heart begins to change first. You notice that you remain calmer in situations that once filled you with fear. You no longer feel compelled to control everything around you. You accept that some questions require time before their answers become clear. You begin noticing and appreciating the small blessings that once passed unnoticed. These transformations are so quiet that many people never recognize them. Yet these inner movements become the foundation upon which every outward transformation is eventually built. A remarkable illustration of this truth can be found in the life of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. During the darkest years of his life, he lost his family, his freedom, and endured circumstances beyond what most human beings could imagine bearing. Seen from the outside, almost every visible sign of hope had disappeared. Yet Frankl discovered that one thing could never be taken from a human being: the freedom to choose one's attitude in the face of any circumstance. Out of that experience, he developed the foundation of what would become logotherapy, emphasizing that people are able to continue living as long as they are able to discover meaning, even in suffering. What is especially striking is that the first miracle in Frankl's life was not the day he was liberated from the concentration camp. The first miracle began the moment he chose not to allow his circumstances to destroy the humanity within him. External freedom came later. Inner freedom came first. Looking back, we can see that this inner transformation became the very source of the strength that allowed him to rebuild his life after the war and ultimately bring hope to millions of others. When we place Frankl's story alongside the journey of faith, we discover a profound meeting point. Time and again, God does not begin by changing the world around you. He begins by preserving hope within your heart. As long as your heart is still capable of hoping, you are still capable of moving forward. And as long as you continue moving forward, your story is not yet finished. We often assume that a miracle will give us greater faith, yet sometimes the order is exactly the opposite. The very fact that God keeps the flame of faith alive during your darkest days may itself be the clearest evidence that He is still present. If He had truly abandoned you, perhaps you would no longer desire to hope. Perhaps you would no longer search for meaning. Perhaps your heart would already have closed itself completely. Yet here you are. You are still searching. You are still listening. You still long to believe that your story contains another chapter. That alone speaks more powerfully than you may realize. The greatest danger during seasons of waiting is not God's silence, but our tendency to reach conclusions about our own story too soon. We often want to close the book while we are only halfway through the chapter. We experience one dark day and imagine that it defines an entire lifetime. But life is never written in a single day, just as faith is never built through a single answered prayer. Some truths become clear only after we have walked the entire journey and can finally understand why every stage along the way was necessary. If today you still possess even the smallest spark of hope, do not treat it as something ordinary. Treasure it as a traveler walking through the night carefully protects the only lantern lighting the path ahead. Do not allow impatience to persuade you to stop walking just before dawn begins to break. You cannot know how close you are to the answer you have been waiting for, but you can choose not to give up simply because today has not yet brought what you hope to see. Perhaps what you call God's silence today is actually the final step in His preparation for the miracle you have been waiting for all along. And perhaps when that day finally arrives, you will realize that the first sign of the miracle was never the moment your circumstances changed, but the moment your heart remained gentle enough to keep believing, peaceful enough to keep waiting, and courageous enough to keep walking even without seeing the entire road ahead. That is when you will understand that the miracle did not simply arrive in your life. It had already begun growing quietly within you, long before you ever recognized it. Throughout this journey, I hope you have come to see that faith is not a path without hardship, but the strength that enables us to remain steadfast as we walk through it. There will be days when God seems silent, prayers that remain unanswered, and seasons when everything appears to stand still. It is precisely during those moments that we are most tempted to believe He has moved far away from us. Yet perhaps those are the very moments when He is quietly accomplishing the most important work that you simply cannot see yet. So if today you are still praying, still holding on to your faith, and still carrying even the smallest spark of hope, do not give up. Keep moving forward. Some doors open only at the appointed time, and some miracles arrive only after we have grown enough to receive them. What God is preparing for you may be far greater than anything you are expecting today. If this video has brought you a sense of peace or offered you a new perspective, please consider giving it a like so that more people may have the opportunity to receive this message. Don't forget to share it with someone who may be growing weary from waiting, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey with us through future videos exploring faith, psychology, and the lifelong process of human growth. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. May you continue to walk forward with peace in your heart, courage in your spirit, and hope lighting the path ahead.